Look at that psychedelic guitar you have. Yeah, boy, is that really great. Okay, I want you to tell me the story of that, but I also want to introduce you because I'm so excited to have the professor of guitar and music production and engineering at the Berklee College of Music. It's Lauren Passarelli. Hello, good morning.
Dr. Richard, hello, hello.
And the hip thing is also that I'm excited to talk to you about is that you're a Beatles expert, and since I've worked with Paul, and we can talk Beatles things too, which would be really good.
I would love that.
I want to know some certain things about guitar sounds, and I know you know the answer. For the audience out there in Radio Richard, Lauren is a great singer-songwriter, and I've asked her to play a couple of her tunes today. So I thought maybe you'd start us out with something, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, I had this little tune pop out one day while I was wishing I could make my cousin healthy.
Nice.
She was having a health issue, and I realized as I was playing it, it was soothing me. And I thought, I should send this to her. In fact, I should call it Song for Susan. And I should actually notate this because I'll never remember how to play it. And it's coming out like a little chord solo kind of a thing. And so
Nice.
a lot of my students really enjoy it because it's in open position and it's one of their first experiences of understanding that the guitar can play more than one note at the same time. And that's a very cool revelation.
Yeah.
So this is Song for Susan.
Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I might add, I expected no less. The guitar sound is absolutely beautiful too.
Oh, thanks.
It really sounds great, and it's so nice to hear somebody who can actually play the thing. Um, and I love that you threw in the four minor, the very Beatlish four minor, because that's a big quality of Beatles songs is they love four minor. Beautiful, wonderful, lovely song for Susan. And now I need to hear the story of your guitar because it's. I mean, did you do the paint job?
I did. I did. This is my 1974 off-white Strat that I couldn't wait to have because of George Harrison's off-white Strat in the concert for Bangladesh. I
Uh-huh.
actually thought his was pure white, but under the stage lights it looks white. Under regular light you could tell it was off-white. But over the years, from all the clothes and colors I would wear, it started to change all kinds of colors. So I
Nice.
completely stripped it and made it natural wood and stained it. And then in 2001, it was just too sad when I knew he was very, very ill.
Hmm.
I tried to paint similar paint job to his magical mystery guitar, Rocky, and
Uh-huh.
just kind of started off with some of those ideas and went crazy doing it myself because he did his himself.
Really? Well, I would be afraid to do anything like that because I wouldn't know what I was doing, but you do know what you're doing. And I mean, do you have to use, I mean, obviously you need special paint, and then do you cover it with some kind of a protective lacquer or something?
Well, I think a real painter might have, or a
Ah,
good guitar finishing person, but mine has a lot of actual levels. You can feel the layers of paint. And Some people argue it was not the thing to do to a 74 Strat, but
Hmm.
since this is a very cool, in fact, I've never found a Strat with a thinner neck. Like this is a very small C or D neck.
Yeah.
But most guitars that fit me perfectly because of this little distance here between the thumb and first
Yeah.
finger.
Uh-huh.
1 and 11/16 is my max. Well, this
Right.
guitar is 1 and 6/16 at the nut. That is a very tiny neck.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I find that whole fascination of how big guitar necks. I mean, you can see I've got a couple of guys sitting here, but I've got this new Sire Larry Carlton model guitar, which it is just wonderful, but it's the smallest neck I've ever played in my life. I
What's
had no idea that 335s had that small of a neck because I've
what
never played one.
what width is the nut?
Well, see, now you're technical. You could tell me the exact thing. I don't know. I just know it's small,
Yeah, that's
you
great.
know,
So
and,
it's
and
comfortable.
there's certain things I can't get, and so I have to, adapt my playing style. I'm so glad that I get to be a guitar nerd for a while. 'Cause usually I talk to people who don't care and don't know, but now I get to talk to Lauren.
And in fact, while you were telling me about that guitar a couple months ago,
Yeah.
I had happened to get a couple of interesting guitars off of eBay called Wolf guitars, WOLF, and I had never heard of
Oh, did you find that?
them. Well, I liked the color of one because I'm very partial to blue.
Okay.
And this other one was a nice double cutaway, and they were so inexpensive. I thought, I'll just get both. Let me just see what they're like. Because most guitars I want to try aren't available in the shops. So
Hmm.
I try a lot of things out online and just see what I like about them or whatever. And
Hmm.
I was so amazed because the store actually said, well, how would you like this set up? What kind of gauge strings would you like on it? And what string height would you like? What? Like I
Nice.
never had a company buy guitars from a company that would actually care about how I wanted to play them.
I
And they
like them already.
set up beautifully, and the pickups actually sound really good. And I'm so impressed with these Wolf guitars.
I really should keep guitar nerding you because one thing I've always wanted to know, it's always fascinated me, is something about George Harrison. I know you know the answer to this. Exactly how did he get that trademark, instantly recognizable George Harrison slide guitar sound? How did he get it? What are the elements of that sound?
Well, he, like I, love a medium weight glass slide.
Okay.
And Ry Cooder had tipped him off to raise the action and put on a heavier gauge string.
Hmm.
He often played slide on his Strat, on his Rocky Strat, in fact, the one that he
Hmm.
had all painted for Magical Mystery Tour.
Hmm.
And he used a medium weight glass slide, and he often double tracked it, and very often he put in harmony. So, what we're hearing is his fantastic touch. I mean, what I've always loved about George Harrison was his touch on guitar. You know,
Yes.
Tal Farlow or Johnny Smith or, Chet Atkins, they had a beautiful, beautiful touch.
Yes.
People will
And,
go crazy getting the same guitar, the same slide, the same amp, the same pedal, the same effects, the
uh-huh.
same amplifier, the same pickups, all this
Sure.
stuff. They completely miss
Indeed.
sense of touch, and that's everything because that's your attack. And for all it's worth, we're playing a plucked instrument, so
Yes.
to play legato is really the hardest thing,
Yes, it
not
is.
staccato and fast and sloppy, so
Yes. Yes. Obviously, the something solo, it's just it's a classic piece of contemporary art, really. But the actual sound of it is so distinctive and so creamy, and I've never really heard anybody be able to get that particular. It's the thickness of the sound and the
yeah.
yeah. And as for the touch, I heard an interview recently with George Harrison where he was saying, well, I'm not really that great of a guitar player because I never practice. And that's a terrible thing to tell students. I never practice. But he said, I practice enough to play the things I need to play.
Yeah.
And he says, I think I'm quite good at what I do. But I'm not a technically advanced guitar player. And I think that's actually a good thing to tell students because it's not about how technically advanced you are. It's about how you can teach yourself how to do what you need to do to express what you want to express.
Yes.
And of course that's something that music schools, if I may say so, don't like that attitude because they're kind of in a machine that needs to produce certain results to get to certain places.
Well, yeah, and it's changed over the years. I can remember some of my teachers saying that Berkeley was teaching folks how to be an all-around great musician that could fit into almost any situation and not self-express. And then certainly after the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, we've been about self-expression sort of since.
Hmm.
And I guess styles and opinions change, but what you're going to do with all this stuff, all
Hmm.
these chords and notes and knowledge and ability, is still my biggest question for all my students because
Exactly.
I want to know, what are you going to make with all of this? Why are you learning all this? What is the point? Where is all this going? Not that they have to have a complete formatted goal in mind, but just that there's some kind of passion and reason to be working and practicing and doing all this. There's getting some
Yeah.
kind of immense pleasure out of it because
Hmm.
to me, even just the frequencies are pleasure. I can just hear one chord and float away. I'm just
That's
so
it. Yeah.
excited about harmony and playing a chordal instrument. Like in high school and junior high school, it was like, well, if you want to play guitar in the stage band, you have to be in the concert band. You have to be in marching band. So what are you going to play now? And so I picked up flute. Completely blew my mind at 15 years old that you needed three flutes to make a chord.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, to me, the last 30 years or so, where everybody wants to play lead guitar and not play chords, is so disappointing because there's only a few instruments on the planet that can play polyphonically.
Yes.
So why are
Yes.
you playing this monophonically? I don't understand it.
But beyond that, I kind of wanted to talk to you about what are you going to do with it to actually earn a living? And then there's the other thing of what are you going to do with it artistically? So I think there's always those two things, art and commerce are always balanced. I find it frightening to think of the many thousands of guitar students and music students who are being belched out of different colleges. And I, of course, think Berkeley holds a special place. It's not just your ordinary music college, but nevertheless, all of these hundreds of thousands of students are coming out, and because of what's happened to the business and because of what's happened to technology, the chances of them actually earning a living are less and less and less. So
Mm.
I don't know how much you talk to your students about those types of things.
Well, they don't ask, which is interesting. And while they're there, that's not necessarily their question. And that's okay because there's certainly enough reason to play and to create music and to satisfy your artistic side that will completely align your mood and train your brain to be in a better place so that you're a better human being on the planet.
Of
And
course.
that alone will attract really good opportunities, whether it's in music or something else. But
Hmm.
the thing I do try to say is don't necessarily put the pressure on your art to make a living because that really dampens things and really spins things off into headache land sometimes for folks because there are so many easier ways to actually make a lot of money. You can go
Oh, right. Yeah, definitely.
so so why put that kind of pressure on your music? Your music could be something that you're doing on the side. It could be something that you do in conjunction with. They're not intrinsic to each other. They're not exclusive from each other. It could do any way you want to create that life is going to
Yes.
be okay. But you'll find your way. Everybody does.
I haven't done anywhere near as much teaching as you have. I've taught in a few actual institutions, colleges, and things, and I've done a lot of master classes and I've done a lot of private teaching. I found that when I teach in schools, I've been a bit frustrated because every time I've been in a situation like that, I get complaints. You're asking us to do too much work. Now, when I was at Berkeley, which is, back in the dark ages before you were born, I never heard anyone even breathe something like that. Every student that I was there with, which was a pretty hip combination of students, I can tell you,
Hmm.
they just said, "Give me more, give me more. What else can I do?" They couldn't get enough, and I couldn't get enough. And I came at it from a very weird situation where I had never had real music training before I went to Berkeley, which was
Wow. You-
I couldn't read. I mean, I could just barely read. I knew where the notes were, but I had taken 3 months of guitar lessons from some guy before I hit Berkeley. I'd been
Wow.
playing for a couple of years, and I'd grown up with music from my father. So they took me in and they said, "Okay, you have to, we'll let you stay for the first semester, but if you don't get a B plus average, we're going to kick you out." So I didn't mind that too much because I really wanted to work. And of course, I had an A average and they let me stay. So that was that. And I, the first year was really tough. I did nothing but memorize scales and arpeggios and chords and whatever. But after that, it clicked in, and the teaching methods of Berkeley were so great. But why I'm talking about myself, I don't want to. But what I do want to talk to is that other colleges that I've been teaching at and other places, they've said, don't give them too much work and you can't fail anybody, and
Yeah.
which is crazy. And I said, how, but what if they're doing no work? Well, they've got to pass because otherwise we lose students and we can't pay our bills. So
Mhm.
that kind of depressed me. So I must say I do prefer teaching privately because then you're talking to somebody and you know what they're doing. But do you feel amongst the students, and you've been doing this for a long time, that the hunger is still there, the passion for the music is still there?
It depends on the person, sure. And it's the luck of the draw. I mean, sometimes you get a semester full of very passionate students, and sometimes it's a mixture. And the last couple of years, it's been very strange because folks weren't used to being back in circulation again. They were
Mhm.
used to doing things on Zoom and really checking out and not really showing up or not really doing much work. And so
Right,
it has been
right.
hard to sort of jumpstart their interests again. But Berkeley's always been the college that, even when it was a family-owned business just starting off, uh, it
Yes,
prided themselves as taking anybody who had an interest and teaching them the correct way to be a real
right.
musician. And it's not just you're a guitar player, it's you're a musician who
Oh,
plays
yes.
guitar. And so uh, I love that Berkeley just teaches you the instrument, whatever instruments you're choosing, and you can do anything you want with it. That,
Exactly. As I famously said to Mr. Matheny in the book that I wrote of interviews with him, I made the point that his sort of thing has always been that the guitar is an instrument like a fork, and that you use it in order to do something.
hmm,
So a lot of people get wrapped up. He was saying a lot of people get wrapped up in the instrument itself,
hmm,
and the instrument starts controlling what you play, which
yeah,
is, and what you just played is such a beautiful example
thank you.
of playing the music and making your instrument do that thing and figuring out the best way that that beautiful instrument can play the thing that you want it to play. And I think a lot of people are kind of stunned by that thing because they're very into, that wanting to shred.
Well,
uh,
I think guitar can function in a band in so many different ways, and uh, Berkeley hasn't really embraced the singer-songwriter way of playing a guitar. And a lot of people out in the world think that if you are a singer-songwriter, then you don't play guitar well, but that's not true either.
Oh, that's
You know,
so
so
untrue. I mean, Paul Simon and
yeah,
James Taylor, I have those two words to say to you.
yes, and they're my certainly very big influences for me.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are, I mean, some of the best guitar playing you'll ever hear is
Yeah,
listening to them play.
yeah. And the Beatles, of course,
Oh, of course, yes, let's not forget
like
them.
three guitar players in that band.
Yes, exactly. And McCartney, I think, is another great example of the idea of it's only an instrument because no matter what he plays, he plays McCartney.
Yes.
He has that phenomenal facility, and when I worked with him, that was something that was always so impressive to me about how instantly he could pick up any instrument and do something that was really remarkable. You know, not just playing something, but really, how did he do that? Or what is, oh, that's an interesting way to go from that chord to that chord. And I mean, he just had that naturally, but it also, you know, he likes to say, "Oh, I'm completely uneducated. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't read music. I don't, you know, that would slow me." Well, the truth is that's not true because harmonically he knows exactly what he's doing. And you know, when you know, I worked with him for a year, and he would say, "Oh no, we go to the G minor six there," and he would be able to say that. He doesn't want anybody to know that because it's kind of tarnishes the image of the, you know, the kind of genius thing. But it's absolutely true.
The reason he knows it is because the Beatles grew up playing their parents' music. When they
Exactly.
wanted to be musicians, it was be an entertainer and it was play the music of the day. And
Mm,
so they were playing music from the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, the 50s. You know, they were just playing all these songs that happened to be written by fantastic composers and lyricists that
exactly.
knew chords, that had the biggest box of crayons, you know? Like when
Yes,
we were in grade school, we wanted the biggest box of crayons, not just a couple of primary colors, a couple of
sure.
power chords or something. So a lot of young people are afraid of those colors because they haven't heard them in their favorite band's music. People haven't been using them. People haven't even been using guitar in the last 30, 40 years very much in popular music. So that's been disappointing.
I think you mean they haven't been using it in an original way.
Yes, in arrangements or even standing out in the band. So people are thinking like guitar isn't important. We could just program a drum groove and throw a synth line in there and it's okay. But the thing I love most about Paul is his self-permission as an artist, as an experimenter, as a curiosity seeker, as a I want to please myself and I want to hear the sounds I want to hear and I'm going to find a way to make them. And if I can't make them, I'm going to hire somebody who can, you know.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
we admire this self-permission in so many ways. Like when he takes to the stage and he's walking around carrying one of those flags of whatever country he's in, it's almost like he's a superhero. He's like the best of what human beings can aspire to because
Yes.
of that self-love and self-permission that some people get upset with him for. Like, why doesn't he go away? Or why is he still doing what he's doing? It's like he loves it. I love
Absolutely.
when he turns around and says, "What? I'm going to stop because of you."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, even when he was 30, you know, people were saying, well, you're a bit past it now, don't you think? And yet, when the four of them came in 1964, the world wasn't about four young men in a band.
No, it wasn't. No.
Guitar was on its way out. They were turned down by every major label twice, and older people with crew cuts ran the world. You know,
That's
and
right.
they weren't accepting of these young guys. Ever
Mhm.
since the Beatles, every major label is like, where's the next four Beatles? Where's the next four Beatles? It's never a formula. It's
Yeah.
never a, this is the reason it worked. I
Well,
think the biggest thing that's happened since the Beatles wasn't even in music. I think it was the Harry Potter books.
well, that's a very fascinating concept. Yes.
And J.K. Rowling was a gigantic Beatles fan, and she loved, loved, loved George Harrison. So there's something about that torch and that permission and that do your own thing your way that she also got from
Yeah.
them. So
And a lot of my students say to me, you know, I'm always urging them to, you know, here are some ways to find your own voice. Here's something you can try. Here's
mhm,
something else you can try. You know, for people who haven't found their own voice. And of
yeah,
course, Pat Metheny's edict is follow what you love. What music do you love most? Okay,
yes,
and then ask yourself the question. I tell my students to write it down. Write down exactly what it is you love about the music you love, or about the songs that you love, or the lyrics you love. Which, you know, what is it about it? Don't
that's
just say I love it, say
mhm,
why.
mm.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, having a relationship. I want some proof here that you love me. I don't want you just to say I love you. You know,
Did you ever hear my playing along with Pat's record? It's for you that audition I had to do for him.
no, I didn't. That's hysterical.
It's on my YouTube channel. Well, that
I'll listen to it.
yeah, well, Gary Burton was president of Berkeley at the time, And
Yes.
I'm walking through the guitar department in the 1140 building one day, and there's a sign on Larry Bayon's door saying Pat Metheny's going on tour and he needs a rhythm guitarist. If you want to apply to audition, you know, you have to play along with one of these songs and,
Man,
make it sound like the record. And I just walked
man,
by it for a few days, and friends of mine were saying, "Are you nuts? You're not going to apply for this?" It's like,
exactly.
you've got one of the best grooves in the business. And I was like, well, I'm not a jazz musician. So they're like, he's not looking for someone to be him. He's looking for someone to play a groove behind him. And you can play
Exactly.
grooves. And you love playing exact voicings and doing exact record copies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Love that. So I had met Pat a couple of times before that at different small jazz clubs in Cambridge. And then he came to talk to the guitar department. And because we had said hello prior to that, I went over to speak to him when a lot of the other faculty weren't even talking to him because they were like scared or something. And he was telling me how much he loved the Beatles and that he had seen A Hard Day's Night 25 times. Did he ever
Yeah,
tell?
yeah, yeah, yeah. We talked a lot about the Beatles.
He wanted to be a Beatle. He loved George Harrison's playing.
Mm,
The story's in my video on my YouTube channel where I'm playing along with his record, It's For You, and trying to play the exact grooves and stuff.
nice,
That
nice.
was fun.
I must look at that.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is that where education can encourage people to, as you said many times, explore, try something different. Try
Mm,
because I fear that listening to music, and I don't just mean uh, pop music or jazz music or singer-songwriter music. I find that there is a kind of homogenized conformity to a great deal of it. My favorite thing to hear, and probably yours too, is when you hear something and say, wait, what was that? I haven't heard
mm.
that before. I love that experience. That's my favorite experience. And yet, there's so little of it I mean, I search around the media. I listen to lots of YouTube channels. I listen to the radio. I listen to whatever's happening. And I don't hear that much that hits me in the forehead and says, wait, this is something, wow, I've never heard anybody do that.
Two things that I've liked recently over the years has been Snarky Puppy,
Yep.
and I just saw the play, the touring production of Hadestown, and the music in that has some beautiful melodies and exquisite harmony. Like I
Mm,
couldn't believe those kinds of songs were being written for a play, but it
mhm.
turns out it was the singer-songwriter Anais Mitchell writing the songs, and they made a play around her songs. So it explains why those melodies are so great. But I was
Right.
so happy that young people were flipping out over this play because,
Yes.
again, melody was coming back into focus. When people are saying something in an original way, they're not thinking up, how can I be original? How can I be
No.
different? How can I just take the world by storm? It's like your originality is already built into you. You already have your own DNA, your own fingerprints. Your own greatness is already there, like an acorn, like you just have to let that blossom and let that turn into something good. And
Yeah.
uh, even the Beatles weren't ever looking like we're going to really conquer the world. I mean, being the
Oh, not
toppermost of
at
the
first,
top
certainly
was a
not.
bit of a joke. It was
Yeah.
just trying to cheer themselves up, but really they just wanted the next rung on the ladder. I just want a better gig. I would just like a gig. I would like to just make a record. I hope we can get on that little tour. I hope we can get on that TV show, and
Yes.
it was just one step at a time.
I didn't get a chance to study with Mick Goodrick, sadly, but I loved what he did with a lot of his students, where the lesson would be they'd go to the window and look, and he'd ask the student to just look out the window and tell him what they were looking at and what was
I've
interesting
heard
out
that.
there. And that, of course, was the key to them finding themselves. One person might concentrate on a puppy going
Mm.
and another person might concentrate on some attractive person going, but they have, or what a beautiful tree that is. So different people will be led to, and he'd say, well, that's what it is, now play that.
It was funny. He was doing all this mentoring with all the different guitar teachers who were ever interested to study with him. This was
Yes,
back in the mid 90s.
yes.
He overheard me talking to another teacher saying, I just worked with Sandra Cott of the Boston Pops And she came over to play violin on one of my songs, and I had written down the melody, but I didn't put in any of the bowing. And when she sat down to play it, she said, "Well, how would you like me to phrase this?" And she phrased it 14 different ways, and each one
Yeah,
had a different emotion. And my
absolutely.
jaw was on the floor, because if you'd put those notes and those rhythms in front of any guitarist, they'd be like, ding, 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 da, ding, ding, ding. That's the melody,
Yeah,
that's the rhythm,
yeah,
that's what's there. And there
yeah.
was so much more there. So he came over to me and tapped on my shoulder and he said, "I want to study with you." And I was like, "Oh God, oh
Well,
no." So we
great.
worked on things for 3 semesters, but you know what he would do? Even if I ever I'd ask him to like teach me things and all this stuff, he'd say, "Just play some more of your songs. I love your voice and I just want to hear more of your songs." And I just couldn't believe it. It's like, come on, this is Mick Goodrick. There's a lot he
Yeah,
could be teaching me, right? And he didn't want to do that. And then when he's, I said to him when I was playing some things live for him, I never even took any composition classes when I was at Berklee. I just sort of feel around the neck, and I just can just tell that this note wants to go here and this one wants to go up and this one wants to go down. And I
right.
just, whether I'm in standard tuning or all the different alternate tunings that I write in, I just follow my emotion and write whatever I want to write. And he said, "That's how you're supposed to write."
You'll get a lot of laughs out of my new book, which is I'm going to plug now, which is Adventures in Jazz Composition. And in it, again, what I'm doing is I throw a lot of candy out there. Oh, look, you could get that. Oh, look, it's a puppy. I'm trying to say to people, yes, of course there are there's a theory of composition, and you have to understand music theory and you have to understand the possibilities, but every possibility has 14 other possibilities. Every kind of rule or every system has 12 other systems you could invent based on that, because my whole system of composition is, if you can do that, well, then why can't you do that? Well, and then the second thing that you've invented, but then why can't you do that? And so that's my feeling about it. And I love that he said that, because he's absolutely right. You don't study to be something else, you study to be yourself. I wanted to also talk to you about what you feel are the pressures, therefore, on musicians who do want to earn a living when they're faced with the realities of what's happening in technology now, and especially the fact that the main system of delivery of music is streaming, where music is so rigidly codified and put into little boxes.
Well, a lot of us older folks do miss the product. Like it was really fun to save up a little bit of money and go get your new album and listen to it,
Yep.
you know, unceasingly for 3 months, so that you knew
Mhm.
that album inside and out. You could read all the credits, you knew all the players, you knew who arranged it, you knew who engineered it, you knew who produced it. I mean, it was a big deal to have something physical from that artist. And we had it for a little while with the CDs and cassettes and things, but to get it down to something so digital now where there's nothing physical to sell and nobody's making much money off the streaming,
No.
that's sad. Uh, as far as technology, though, I mean, you look around, you see I have a lot of recording toys and stuff. I'm always fascinated with technology. I've always loved playing with tape recorders and microphones since I'm 11 years old. So I'm not against technology per se. And I certainly wasn't one that would ever think I'd be using a computer so much, even because in the early days, the computer screens were kind of glaring and they would hurt my eyes and such. But that's become the tape recorder, to use
Yeah,
Logic. And
indeed.
now, even just us talking, being able to do this while you're in California and I'm in Massachusetts, I mean, it's fascinating what technology has provided. So I feel like any really cool independent thinker and cool artist can find a way to use the technology to their advantage and create something wonderful with it that's unique to them. And it'll just be another tool. I don't think it's anything to fear.
Well, I agree with you. And being just a couple of years older than you, I watched it go from, I mean, I started as a professional in 75. And if you think about where technology was then, I mean,
Mm.
we were just in London when I started in the studios there. A lot of the studios were still 16 track. I came out of Berkeley, sadly, knowing zero about recording studios, because I had recorded in them, but I didn't have time to take those courses. I wanted all the composition courses.
There
And
weren't many in those days either.
Yeah, and I think there was a studio there, a
Yeah,
small
one.
studio, one. So I didn't know what I was doing, but I had to learn by doing. And
Yeah.
so every time I worked in the studio, and I was uh, working in the studios very quickly after I got out of Berkeley.
If I could just jump in there and just point out what's so cool about that for students today is a lot of folks just think all these faces that say, I don't know anything, I don't have to know anything, I don't really play, my band just plays, or I don't have to produce, or I don't really have to know anything about recording, or I don't really have to know anything about arranging, all that stuff. Somebody has to know. If you're really going to get your project off the ground, there's going to have to be somebody that you hire that knows.
Absolutely.
And you need,
Absolutely.
it's like when I audition bass players or something, if a bass player says, oh, it's a G major 7 over E, or G major 7 over B, is it okay if I play the low G? It's like, next, like you have to know, you know?
Yes. And that was the whole point of my book, The Invisible Artist, to show
Yeah.
how arrangers who know, they're the guys who know and the women who know, somebody's got to know the music itself.
Somebody has to play the damn song.
And most people don't. Most artists don't. And this is another reason why I say I don't think it's a good idea when most artists produce themselves, because you've got the opportunity to have somebody who you respect giving you their input.
Yeah.
And if it's a kind of a loving input, if it's a kind of artistically respectful input, wow, how great that is to have.
Well,
uh,
someone to help expand you and bring out the best, not
yeah.
just take you off, into another ditch someplace.
Right. And I'm the guy who always says, That's great, but what if we did this?" And I
Hmm.
let the artist hear it and they say, "Oh, yeah, that's better. Okay, let's do that."
Yeah.
And
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 it's not
that's the big
you,
thing.
and it wasn't just you putting in your 2 cents so that your name's on it or that it goes in the direction you want. It's actually something that's really lifts the song to a new musical
And
level.
that's always the point. That's
That's
always the point,
the best
to
thing,
lift
yeah.
the song and to clarify the intent of the artist.
Well, you got to remember too, with the Beatles, they had a fantastic team around them. The
Oh,
finest
abs-
recording engineers, the best producer, and what made George Martin, Sir George Martin, such an amazing producer? He was a fantastic arranger.
exactly.
That
Thank
was
you very
what did
much.
it. Yeah, and I loved your book. I took it out of the library, and there was a couple of your other books I took out of the library. You make, you know, fantastic points. I don't know if people will always cherish the things that you and I cherish, but that doesn't matter either because your values and your musicality will always be something special to somebody, and it
Yes.
doesn't matter if it is to everybody.
Yeah.
What's interesting about guitar, though, is that guitarists and piano players are taught to be virtuosos. So you're always practicing and you can do your own thing. It's very self-contained. But drummers and bass players are always looking to play with each other and looking to play with other instruments. So they come up with more socialization in band situations more often.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point. I've never heard anybody mention that, but that's a really good point.
if I had been surrounded by people who were producers and arrangers, I would have loved to have had company at a much earlier age. I do a heck of a lot more collaboration now and record for a lot of other artists and mix for them and such. But I've always enjoyed working as a team. It's just I also knew starting to write songs at 10 years old that this was something I just stumbled on, and there were so many songs pouring out of me that I knew I should just learn how to play with the gear because this would be too expensive to have to go to a studio every time I want to hear something that's in my head, and I
Hmm.
could hear so many ideas. So I would just record tons and tons of guitar parts, with cassette to cassette and then quarter-inch reel to reel 4 track and then a half-inch 8 track,
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ADATs. And then the whole point was I needed a dream machine to play all my ideas back and hear them at once. And in those days, those things didn't exist. So
Oh,
again, technology advancing caused all those things to become less and less expensive and more cool gear being possible for the
yes.
consumer.
Everything about technology that has developed and will develop way more. The one aspect that I think has made it more difficult for musicians to earn a living is the method of delivery. Because when the CD came in, I spoke to the head of EMI and I said, "Wait a minute, you are putting copy protection on them, aren't you?" And they said, "Oh, no." It would take another 6 or 8 months for that. And we want to release it now." And I said, "But," he said, "Oh, nobody will be able to copy CDs. It's way too expensive. I mean, they'd have to go to a recording studio to do that. Don't be ridiculous." And I said, "I'm telling you, I work in the studios every day. People will be copying CDs and they'll be worthless soon." And he said, "Oh, well, he says, why you are a musician and I'm the head of this company."
But
So, but and 6 or 8 months later,
the
uh,
rest is
they
history.
found out. And I'm hoping that since live music is the only way that people can actually make any kind of a fee for playing music, that will get larger. There are more clubs and more cafes and more places where people can play live. Because I know you were in that Beatles group.
Yeah, I've toured for years, probably good 17 years between two tribute bands, one doing the Beatles music from 1963 to 1970, and
Ah,
found on the internet another band got in touch with me, and I was doing the solo Beatle years, where there were 70 more number one hits and 700 more songs
that's
to learn.
that's right. That's right.
So, all
Amazing.
those great songs were really fun. But I was always doing solo guitar and vocal kinds of gigs. And
Uh-huh.
early days, certainly tons of restaurant gigs and hotel lounge gigs, singing and playing
Right.
live jukebox and such.
Okay, so here's my question. If you had to do a gig tomorrow night with a bass player, just a bass player and you, what guitar and what amp would you take with you?
I'd probably take a Strat and a little Fender amp. Yeah.
Which one? How
Well,
the
I've been really liking this Princeton Reverb
Wow,
that I
okay.
got in a trade recently. So yeah, it's probably not going to need to be too big and too loud. And if it's in a bigger place, they can always reinforce it and mic it.
Yeah. Do you have a super duper pedal board?
I did. I got rid of all those things when I stopped touring with those bands. There was all kinds of sound-alike things and automatic MIDI, step on any pedal, change the sounds 4 times within one song kind of capability.
Yeah, yeah,
I was doing all the Line 6 stuff because they
yeah.
did variaxes, and the James Tyler variax was very helpful because you
But
could.
what would you use tomorrow night? What would you take tomorrow
I
night?
would just probably bring a regular Strat, and I have a couple to choose from.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've not a lot of effects. You wouldn't take much.
Probably not. Maybe a chorus. If I'm just playing with a bass player, I'm just accompanying myself, so I wouldn't need all the different distortions and all those cool things, but the
Hmm.
overdrives. Well, people are loving that things are getting so much smaller now, nobody wants to lug around the stuff, so
Yes. Well, I hate to give them a plug, but I actually have been gigging with the Spark 40.
there you go.
Have you tried that out?
No. But for a while,
Oh,
I was using my little Hohner Steinberger copy, which looks like a little paddle. It was this big, and I'd travel
yeah.
on planes with that. And then I'd use all the amp simulations from Agile Partners that was in my
Right.
phone and plug in
Okay.
the thingy, and my phone was my preamp.
That's it. And that's
So all the
exactly how the
effects were in the
Spark.
phone.
That's how the Spark works. Because I just take that and in my phone I can get 7 billion different sounds.
That's it,
Yeah.
so that's great for traveling for sure.
And I asked them, is there any way that I could plug that amp into another amp? Why is there no output? And they said, "Oh, we don't want it to be used live. We don't
What?
want it to be used." I know, that was crazy. I thought it
What?
was absolutely crazy.
Me?
So I just put a mic in front of it, but if I
Hmm.
have to. Tell me
Hmm.
about what your new projects are.
I just finished an album called Snowcake. It felt like it achieved some of the new recording techniques and things I've been learning from all the cool places. I mean, that's the greatest thing about technology has been YouTube and all
Yeah,
the things that you can learn and grow from, and the friends you can make all around the world out there.
indeed. I would love it if you would sing us another song or play us another song or do whatever you want to do.
Sure. Well, it was interesting, speaking of Paul, Mr. McCartney, sir, he had enjoyed his trying to play box beret, playing voicings in tenths, and when he wrote Blackbird,
Yes.
he and George Harrison loved that song, but liked the doubleness of that arrangement because it's interesting to play on the guitar. And they
Oh,
only knew the tune so far. So Paul just said, well, I'll write my own, you know. And so he said, why don't I find another way to accompany myself like that on an acoustic when he was working on his Chaos and Creation in the Backyard album. And for
mm,
that album, he wrote a song called Jenny Wren. And when I heard that story that he wanted to revisit that accompaniment style, that's one of those kinds of things I do in my songwriting guitar lab. It's like we can get in from a variety of stories and lyrical aspects or a title that can spark off some thoughts for lyrics, but the guitar itself can offer all these starting off places. And this voicings and tense idea was really appealing to me. So I thought, why don't I play with a lot of those shapes? You know, you have all those, and you just put your fingers anywhere and find all these shapes, right? So I came up with a progression I really loved, and I wanted it to be a lullaby for my niece, who was 1 year old at the time. Her name is Bella, so I called it Bellaby. So this is Bellaby with all the voicings and tenths, thanks to Sir Paul. When you call my name, when I feel you smile, laughter sees me in your eyes. Bye bye, lullaby. Bye bye, lullaby. With your gentle stare, with your charming heart, love has torn my doubt apart. Bye bye, lullaby. Bye bye, lullaby. How say now, say how, say now. Bye bye, bye bye, lullaby. When you call my name.
yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Very beautiful. And you have an unusual little chord up there. I can't remember what it was, but you have a beautifully, slightly unexpected chord that when you get up high, and
Yeah.
it's just great. And I think that makes the song very special.
Well, I think that's what's so cool. You know, there's a woman named Susan G. Wooldridge who wrote a book called Poem Crazy and another one called Fool's Gold. And she encourages people to play with words like they're blocks, like you can move them around in the sentence and put things all over the place. And
Mhm.
meaning will take care of itself because that's what human beings do. We make sense out of chaos.
Yes.
So it's the same with chords and shapes. I mean, I always telling my kids, you can put your fingers anywhere and make up chords, or so you think you're making up chords, but you're literally coming up with things that make sense because you're part of the fabric of life and you've heard music your entire life. You're going to do things that you've heard and you're going to do
Yes.
things that you like. And the chord meaning will even take care of itself. And I love when I go to write these things down. It's like, wow, there's a minor six in there. Wow, there's some augmented chords. Oh my goodness, look, I put a diminished thing in there.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me because my sensibilities and growing up in the 70s heard a lot of fantastic music from Chicago and Stevie Wonder and Yes,
Sure.
the Allman Brothers and the Beatles and
Right.
James Taylor and all these fantastic composers, Carly Simon, fantastic writers and not shy of using any of the millions of chords. I mean, you could just Google the chords the Beatles used and see everything that people shy away from and think are jazz chords. I'm not
Yeah.
going to play it because it's a jazz chord. It's like you're missing out on some
Yeah.
really rich information. It's like tasty food, like really good, tasty food, not just bland stuff. Play with the
Well,
chords.
yes, and we put labels on things in order to tame them, in order to make them something that we can understand. But we don't need to put labels on things. I mean, fusion, I've always said, is creativity because when you put peanut butter together with jelly, it's a different thing. You know, so therefore, any kind of fusion can work if you have a story to tell, if you have a point to make, and I think that's a really really important concept for people to take on board.
How would
And
you train people to just listen to the song and play the song? Because I've had a couple of people recently say to me, "Well, what style is this? I don't know how to accompany you. What style is this? Like, if it isn't jazz, if it isn't pop, if it isn't Latin, if it isn't like
exactly,
they don't
exactly.
know what to play." And I heard Jeff Lynne say it best recently in one of his specials that was on the BBC that I just recently saw, and he said, "I like pop music because it's all the styles." And I thought that's perfect. That's
That's right.
perfect.
Yeah,
Like maybe that's why a lot of my music is a combination of styles because it
it's
is
very
pop
true.
rock. I thought that was a really great definition of it. But
Yes, it's
people
very
have
good.
to react to the song, play something that fits the song.
Exactly. And as a professional arranger for all these years, one of my jobs has always been to come into a musical situation which is already to a certain extent composed. And
Mhm.
then they say, what do you think? What does it need? And so I have to identify because I can put those labels on, say, okay, what he's done there is X, and what he's done there is Y, what he's done there is, whatever. But I need to identify it, and then I need to say, well, here, this is the thing that I would do with it.
Hmm.
And it's either additive or subtractive. Sometimes I say, take that away because it's cluttering up this, and this instrument here is getting in the way of the voice, so why do you have it there?
Yeah.
That's not good. So I do this a lot with backing vocals. People think that but I don't like anything that distracts from the lead vocal. I just don't like it. And historically it's never been successful to have things that distract from the lead vocal.
Yeah.
So I definitely do that. But I mean, that's my job. And so it's a combination of people coming up with things intuitively and then helping them with intellect, the joining of the intellect, say, hey, Mr. Intellect, here, meet Miss Creativity, and now you can get together. And that's the fun part of it for me.
One of the things I like about writing songs that was interesting about Bellaby too was that you have a choice when you go to write a melody. Is your melody going to follow the top notes of your chords and the voice leading, or is it going to go something contrary? And it was
Right.
fun that one stayed with it.
Yes, yes. Well, Lauren Passarelli, this is your life. No, I mean, it's been
Well,
so great to have you.
Radio Richard!